Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first 2021 web meetup of GDG Minsk community. It's really cool you're here and you joined us, so thanks a lot for that. And let me share what I'm going to talk about before we start. So here we are GDG Minsk community. Here are our nice logo. And usually we do meetup on the three different streams: mobile, front-end, and cloud. And today we're talking about mobile and more specifically about the web-related stuff. And here are the couple of links where you can find us. You can join us in a Twitter, you can join us in Telegram or in a Facebook, and be always in touch with us. Apart from the news, we also share some interesting articles and interesting stuff about what's going on in the development areas and in programming. And so, what's going on today? Today we'll have the two incredible persons. The first of them is Nikita Poltoratsky. I guess you know him. He is working as a developer and software architect at Akveo. And he is our Minsk Angular GDE, Google Developer Expert. So it's really cool that he joined us today, and he will talk about the modules federation stuff. And the second guy, I'm really honored that he actually joined us here. It's Lars Nilsson. I get to know him at NG Vikings conference in Copenhagen a couple of years ago. And he's one of my most favorite speakers. Very calm, but every talk is usually such deep and filled with information. So I really hope you enjoyed it. If you will have any feedbacks about us, any feedbacks about events and stuff, please do not hesitate to leave it. There is a link and QR code about that. And okay, guys, we're still online. So we still have some restrictions, and I believe everybody would appreciate that we will meet physically, but it's not going to happen right now, and we're still online, but it's okay. And in case if you have any issues with translation or connection and stuff, don't worry. Just try to reload the page, tell us about what's happening, and you will have the recording anyway. It will be free in YouTube. And also, even if we are online, one of the biggest purposes of all these meetups and all these translations is a collaboration. We all work here for a community, to make community grow, to make people asking questions and finding answers. So that's why do not hesitate to ask questions in YouTube chat while you're listening. Maybe we will not answer immediately because of delay between the translation and the YouTube, but still in the end of session, we'll try to answer all the questions. So please do it. And even you can say some hi and welcome words. It will also be absolutely good. And also, it will be really great if you will share the video or put some likes or put comments. So do any activity in YouTube with this one so that we'll have their bigger impact and will bring much more interesting speakers. And follow our speakers. They're incredible people, and they will, I believe they will put their Twitters and other sources of information. They're doing the community work every day. They put in some articles, some open source contributions. It's really cool. So follow it and try to get inspired about that. And the most important thing, enjoy it. Enjoy what you're doing here, what you're listening, and so on. And the last one, and I will go silent. I have a question for you, and I would really appreciate if you answer it in our YouTube chat. So we're looking for new speakers, and we're looking for the new sources of inspiration for our meetups. So if you will put any words about that, what kind of speakers you would like to bring, or maybe some JavaScript or TypeScript topics you would like to cover, you would like to listen to, maybe some new frameworks, which I don't know, but you might be interested. So put it here in YouTube chat, and I will think how can make it happen so that one of our new meetups will have it covered. So really appreciate your help. And let's meet our speakers, Nikita and Lars. Say hi to everybody.
Hello.
How are you today? How is it going?
It's a great day. It was a great day. Great Thursday.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for inviting me. I'm only doing invites lately, so I'm glad to be here.
I wanted to invite you, I don't know, months before this event, so I pinged you with the messages, and thanks a lot that you agreed to join us. It's really cool, and I really appreciate that stuff. So maybe we can start, and Nikita will be first. So please go ahead, share your screen, and people put your comments and questions in YouTube chat, and I will look through every question, and we will have the small Q&A session after Nikita's talk. Okay? So enjoy this time.
Okay, great. So let's go. So here's my talk title. You don't need module federation, but let's first of all start with who I am. So who I am. My name is Nick Poltoretsky. I'm working at a company called Akveo, where I'm doing lots of JavaScript, lots of Angular, lots of some system stuff, some manager stuff, and so on. So I'm more like a developer portion and advocate. And here is my Twitter handle, and I would say it's more like my social handle. You can find me with this handle at Twitter, at Medium, at Dev2, almost everywhere. So don't hesitate, follow me on Twitter, and I'll help you with everything you want related to web technologies. And finally, here's how to make .software. Here's my website. It's my blog platform. So I'm publishing my posts there. I'm publishing some different cool tools there, my videos and so forth. So go to how to make .software and subscribe to my newsletter. So what are we gonna talk about? First of all, we'll start with the module federation. With what is it? Because I bet not all of you know what is it. In spite of all my newsletters and all the news systems were spammed by the module federation content maybe last 6 months. So I think some of you have no idea what is it. Some of you know heard about it, but don't know how it works. And I will try to make us on the same page to allow us speak about it, problems about it, features, and so forth. So then I'll show you a demo, and we will discuss the features of the module federation, cool ideas it allows us to implement. And finally, what's the main point of this talk? We'll talk about the problems, about the trade-offs it will bring to our projects. Okay, let's start with the first point. Here is the module federations. Here is not equality, it's kind of my associations just to make you understand my ideas better. So I would say that module federation is like about microservices for the front end. Module federation is a Webpack plugin that allows you to split your application into multiple different modules and compile and deploy them completely separately, and then bundle them into the single application right in the browser. Okay, so it allows you to split your application to multiple different chunks that do not related to each other, and they will be gathered into the single application right in the browser, not during the build time. Okay, it's a runtime. That's the main idea. So let's take a look. How does it work a bit? So right now, if we need to make some part of our application to log dynamically, we are using a Webpack, and we are just typing import braces, and okay, so here we want to import a dialog component, and the Webpack will understand that we need to bundle this dialog component into the separate chunk and then load it dynamically when it will be requested. So here's the first version. Like before, we place this current near our current file, this dialog component, to allow Webpack to find it and to build it into the separate bundle. In case if we have no dialog component near our current file, Webpack will throw an error and you'll not be able to bundle your application. But right now you can do so. So it's an after section. Now you can type like import braces and dialog component. And right now, if you're using module federation plugin, you do not need to place this dialog component near your current file, it can be placed somewhere. It can be placed, hosted somewhere on across the web. I have no idea where, at some different services. So it can live anywhere, not in your project, not in your repository. It can be built by any other company or by any other team or by any other developer and hosted everywhere. It doesn't need to live in your project. So let me show you how does it look like. Here's an example of the module federation plugin from the demo. I'll show you in a few minutes. So how does it look? It's just part of the Webpack configuration I have written. So what's going on here? We're adding a module federation plugin into our Webpack build configuration. Great. And we are telling that this current application name will be design system. That means that it will be imported in other applications under this name, okay? And file name remote entry means that we'll build our remote entry from our current application to this specific file, and then another application will be able to load our application exposed modules through this remote entry file, okay? Then we're adding that some content that will be exposed from our application. So when I will build this application, I will expose dialog components from it. And then when another application will load this file dynamically, he'll be able to use this dialog component the same way as as I showed you in the previous slides when we imported it dynamically. Okay, here's the way how we can add remotes that will be used in our current application. So when we need to say that I just want to load another remote application or another remote module federation application, I will configure it as a remote. And finally, module federation plugin allows us to share some dependencies. For instance, we can share a React dependency. In that way, if both my application, one that exposes module and one that consumes its module, will require exactly similar React with exactly similar version, then module federation will not load it 2 times. It will load it only 1 time and reuse this shared dependency. Great. It was just a small example. One more association, just for understanding, is that module federation it's like an NPM in the browser from my point of view, okay? So it allows you to say that your application requires some different modules. Like in NPM, it's not modules. In module federation, it's like module federation modules, and then bundle them in the browser. So it's like a new idea of the package management. So you can, lots of people across the globe can bundle their parts in small module federation modules, and then you can reuse it in your application easily. So it's kind of a package manager for the browser. Again, it's not an equality, just an association, just to make you understand it easily. Okay, and finally, a bit of terminology to speak about it. So what is module federation? I already told you. It's an Webpack plugin that allows you to compile your application in such a way that some exposed parts from this application can be consumed by another application across the web. Okay. Here is the next term is host. Host is an application that will load federated plugins from other application. Remote is an application that provides those plugins for another application, such as host application, which will load remotes. So first of all, we are running host application in the user's browser, and then this host application will load some remote parts inside it. And finally, here's a bidirectional host. It's the thing that I showed you before, like Webpack configuration, because that's a thing that exposes some modules, and at the same time, it can consume some modules. So it does like 2-way. So it's a bidirectional host, okay? So finally, let me show you a demo on how does it work. So where is it? Okay. So here I have let's start with a code base here. So here I have 2 applications, both of them written using React, just because it's simpler than Angular and easier to show. So what's going on here? Here I have 2 applications, app 1 and app 2. App 1 is hosted at the localhost 3001, and app2 is hosted at the localhost 3002. So here I have an index file that's loaded as a bootstrap file that just renders app here, okay? And app renders a red title, and what's the most important here, just imports a blue title from the app2. Okay, so it renders just two titles, just two pieces of text. And here, yeah, it loads this title from the blue title, app2 blue title. Since app2, if we can look here, SRC have a blue title here. It's just a blue title component. And the same thing as the app component, it renders its own blue title and dynamically imports red title from the app one and renders it. Okay. Also, here I can show a Webpack configuration. What's most important here is module federation. So it's a Webpack configuration for the app one. Its name is app one. It configures file name, and what's most important, remotes. Okay. So it says that app2 requires these remote entry files that will be downloaded from the localhost 3002. And since we have configured remotes like app2, because of that, we can go to the app file and write that we are importing something from the app2 and type some dependencies that is exposed from the app2. And if I go to the Webpack configuration from the app2, you will see that app2 exposes blue title. Okay, so I bet you got a point here. So let me show you how does it work. So here is a localhost 3001. So we are loading the first application that renders just a red title and then renders blue title. But blue title here is loaded dynamically at the runtime from another application that is hosted on the localhost 3002. So let's take a look here. Here is a remote entry that's loaded from the localhost 3002. And then we are loading src blue title.js. So it's a file that's loaded dynamically. That is file that contains blue title components that's exposed from the localhost 3002. If I go here at the preview, I'll make it a bit smaller, we'll be able to find it. Okay, so it's React import. So for instance, here are styles that are rendered for the blue title components. It's like create element h1 with the styles color blue and blue title. If we go here, we have the same styles here and a blue title here. This is just a React component that was loaded dynamically from another host. Okay, and let me close it. If I go to the localhost 3002 to load blue title first because it's its own component, and now red title are loaded dynamically. And if we take a look here, exactly we have the same file, but now it's red title.js, and it contains content that corresponds to the red title React component that it lives in the app one. So color red and red title is written here, and we can go here, find a red title, and yeah, here it is. This is just a React component loaded dynamically. And what's the most important, it's not only loaded dynamically, it's completely bundled dynamically. So these two applications, application one and application two, are bundled dynamically. They have no idea about each other. But then in the browser, my application tries to download the remote entry file that specifies my Webpack configuration. And if it exists, then I can consume some components that are exposed from it. Okay, great. So I think we ought to move on to the next point, that is features. I bet you already got the idea of the module federation. So what features it brings to us? First of all, it's independent deployments that I think one of the most important features that it brings to us, because it allows us to split our application into multiple different modules and deploy them separately. That means if I'm changing the only small part of the app, I do not need to recompile and redeploy the whole application. I can recompile and redeploy only the small part of this app. Okay, it's great. And it will be updated, and in the runtime, when the next user will open the page, he'll download a new version of the JavaScript, and he will get this change. So we don't need to redeploy all the app each time. The next idea I see here is kind of a plugin architecture. Since we can load independent modules in the browser in the runtime, we can do plugin architecture easily. So we can implement it in a very cool way, and I'll show you a bit later what am I talking about. The next point is dependency sharing, and that's the point that I showed you. So if I have, for instance, 10 different module federation applications, and they consume lots of modules from each other, and all of them are compiled and deployed separately, but if they require the same version of the React, then we'll have no problems, because module federation plugin will take care about it, and it will reuse this React dependency for us. Okay. And the final code is that it's a framework agnostic solution. I just inserted it here just to highlight it, because since module federation is built on the lower levels and frameworks, okay, it's built on the level of build tools, since it's a Webpack plugin, then we can say that it is a framework agnostic solution. In fact, if we want, we can use multiple frameworks on the same page, because module federation allows us to export and consume different JavaScript, whatever you want. So thinking about it, we can say that we can run multiple different frameworks on the same page. Sounds great, I think. Okay. The next point is ideas. So here's a few ideas on how you can use your module federation in your projects. For instance, Evergreen design systems. I think that's your dream. That was my dream, because since in my company we are doing lots of different applications that are bound to the same design system, and if design system changes, we need to rebuild and redeploy all the applications that are related to this design system. But if we are using the module federation to build and compile design system, and we are using module federation for our applications to allow them to consume design system as a federated plugin, in that case, we do not need to redeploy and rebuild our application if something's changed in the design system. I would say we can just recompile our design system, redeploy it, and boom, everyone is getting the new version of the design system, and all the applications works, and all the colors, all the buttons, and I don't know, imagine other cases, works the same in all the applications. So I think that's cool. The next point is, for instance, app shell. That works great when we are talking about some kind of enterprise, like big applications. That's a pretty common pattern when they have a shell applications, for instance, with a menu and maybe a few different modules, buttons, I don't know. And then inside, each menu point redirects you to the separate dashboard, where each dashboard is a very huge application that can be built, for instance, by separate teams and so on. And if you have multiple teams are working on that project, you need to find a way on how to deal with the complexity when you have a standalone applications and multiple teams are contributing inside, and you need to work with it somehow. And module federation can help us here while splitting our application onto multiple different applications that are bundled and deployed separately. Okay, so all our dashboards can be built and deployed as a separate applications, and they even can be accessed as a separate applications. But if we need to insert them inside the shell, we can just load them, as I showed you in the my React example. We can do the same with not only with the button components or title components or dialog components. We can do that with an app component. So we can just load dynamically part of that application, just this dashboard, and show it in the shell. So I bet that's pretty simple, but it's pretty powerful solution. Another case, it's pretty similar to the previous one, but I just want to mention it, is a multi-shell. It's a pretty common situation. So I saw it multiple times. When you have different modules in your application, you are selling products, and you need to sell different modules to different customers. In that case, you can do that really simple with a module federation, since you can bundle them separately and just include some specific parts in the shells. So it will be lots easier with a module federation. So everything that I showed you before, I hope that looks great for you, because it looks great for me. And I would say, yeah, it is. It's great until it's not as great as I see. And what is the problem? So all this stuff with the module federation and all this hype over it, it's really reminds me of the way when people invented microservices. It was, as I remember, 15 years ago, and then people started to use microservices everywhere, and then people understand that there are lots of problems with the microservices. They need to somehow deal with the infrastructure problems, somehow deal with very big number of problems that microservices bring to our projects. And now people learned, people have knowledge, and people understand how to use microservices and when to use microservices. And since module federation introduced pretty similar ideas from my point of view, I decided to try to procrastinate on the problems it may bring into our projects. And then now I have a list of different problems that I think you will have in your project if you'll start using module federation without a real need for that. Yeah, okay, so let's go on. The first problem, of course, is versioning. I think it's one of the most popular problems with the software when you have multiple different parts of the software. Okay, so if your system consists of multiple different subsystems, then you will definitely have some problems with versioning, I think. What's going on here? If you are doing multiple modules in your front-end application, and somehow API of some module will change, what's going on? You'll just break the applications that use this model. And when we are doing that in the build time, like including NPM packages in our builds, and so of course we'll catch that error at the build time, and I hope it will not go to the production, people will not see it. But if we're talking about the module federation, we can just change the API of our design system, for instance. Yep, remember that example when I told you that, for instance, we have a design system and multiple apps that consume it. So in that case, if we change the API in the design system, for instance, it will start opening dialogues with another method name, and all the applications will be broken, and we will not notice it. Only our users will notice it. So it will be a problem, I bet, or a big problem. And here I have a few ideas on how to deal with it. For instance, we can start versioning of our APIs. Yeah, it sounds like a cool idea, because if we can add a version to our API, in that case, we can control on when our clients, so when the clients of our model will consume our APIs. So if we are changing the API of the dialog, then we are publishing it to another URL. And all the applications that are consuming our design system, they will still consume it from the V1. But when they will decide to migrate to the new API, they will do the migration and change the API, change the URL from which it downloads our module with the design system. Pretty easy, but in that case, we can't allow our system to update dynamically, because if I'm changing the color of the button, for instance, for the primary button, for instance. Yep, we will still have to redeploy all the applications. That depends on this model because they will have to change the version of the APIs they're consuming. In that case, I think we can publish all the minor changes and all the patch changes to the same version of the API. And when something like interesting changes, and if we are breaking something, in that case, we are publishing a new version. So it's kind of a semi-version. And the same thing about the date version. I saw that multiple projects, and I think that works great. So I would say if you are not using any great versioning technique, will be like this guy who is publishing the production and then trying to leverage all the problems it brought to you. So I would say we can continuously deploy minor and patch versions to our current deploy. Okay, so if we deploy the version 1, we can continuously add minor and patch versions to it, and every client will be updated and everything will work great. And then when we need to break something, we'll deploy a new major version with a new URL. Okay, so that's great, but as you can see, it's introduced a few more complexities in our system. So we need to control versions, we need to keep two APIs, because when we are deploying a new version, we need to wait until all the clients of our module will change that version. So we can't just stop the previous version. We need to change until all the clients will change the version. Okay, that was the first point. The second point is performance. Of course, it's performance. So that's an idea to show you how well will work your client's browsers when you'll start using module federation, I think. Just because module federation is not introducing any performance problems by itself, but it makes simpler for you as a developer to introduce more performant problems. So I would say, yeah, module federation introduce a bit more of JavaScript, but it's just a few kilobytes, so it doesn't matter. But when you are using module federation, you can easily introduce lots of different libraries and frameworks into your project. Okay, so if you're using an Angular, for instance, in your app, and then you say, oh, okay, I can write a separate module. Maybe we'll write it in React, or maybe in Vue, or maybe in Svelte, or whatever framework. And finally, in a few years, you will have multiple frameworks in the front end, and that will be all full. So I would say that module federation doesn't introduce any performance problems by itself, but it allows you to break your performance simpler, lots simpler than it was before. Okay, communication. That's the next pretty important point, I think. So, what's the problem with the communication? With the communication, the main problem is the tight coupling. I think since we can download JavaScript dynamically, download federated modules from other hosts, we will start coupling them. So I bet we will have cases when two modules are importing each other, are using services from each other or whatever, and we'll start live as a single module, and it will be impossible to use them separately because it will crash. So I would say the best idea here is to never communicate with federated modules directly and use kind of an event bus. I hope you know this pattern when all the modules of the system will not communicate with each other directly, so we'll have no idea about other modules. They will just subscribe to the event bus. That's will be shared thing. Yep. So they will subscribe to it and listen for particular events, and they will publish their events to this event bus. Okay, but they will not communicate to each other directly, never. Okay, let's move on. The next part is state management. That might be not very obvious, but I'll try to explain it. So the problem with the state management is exactly the same as we have the problem with different databases from microservices architecture. There is a very like a rule of thumb for the microservices that each microservice has to have its separate database. And all the changes to this database can be made via this microservice. The problem is, if another services are starting to write in this database directly, then we have kind of not obvious communications with these microservices. So some data appears in this database, but we have no idea why, because our service doesn't write inside. So the same thing with the state management. So I think if we are using module federation and loading different parts of our application dynamically, each of these parts has to have its separate state management, and it has to consume data through its APIs. They shouldn't have any shared state manager, because in that case, one additional module can break all your system just because you will load it and it will change some data inside, and you will have no idea why, because it has no API to change this data. It will change it by itself, so it's pretty weird. Those bugs will be almost impossible to catch. So the best practice is to add a separate state manager to each dynamically loaded plugin in your app and communicate only through their APIs, and no other way to do so. Okay. The next point is testing. And with testing, we have problems again. You might notice that now we just split all the parts of the application into multiple federated modules. So they're compiled and deployed dynamically and separately, and then bundled in the browser. So you can conclude that now it's easier to test, because you do not need to run the whole application to test some parts of it. So it might be faster. Yeah, it might be faster, but I can claim that it will be more complex, just because if you start writing integration testing, because if you need to do integration testing, you will have to somehow up multiple different hosts with different modules and coordinate with them, and testing will be just harder, because before, when we had to write an integration testing, we just ran our application and ran our tests, and it works. And now we'll have to run different applications, combine them somehow, and run some specific tests. So I just claim that it will be really harder. And what's the bad news here, I have no idea how to deal with that simple. Because, yep, we can write some scripts, we can invent complex solutions for that. Of course, we can solve the problem, but it will be harder than it was before, and that's my point. Great. The next point is security. I would say that's very fast about that. So module federation, as I told you, is like an NPM in the browser. So it loads some scripts from other domains. And if we are doing kind of a pluggable architecture, we can allow users, for instance, users to insert the URLs in our applications, and our system will download this code and run these plugins. But in that case, we can download some malware or something like that. So I have a few concerns about the security with the module federation, but I don't tell you that it has real problems with the security. I would say if you trust NPM, then you have to trust module federation, because in general, you will not have any security problems. It might be in some specific cases you will, but not in general. So don't hesitate about that. And the next thing, and as I remember, the final is a documentation. The problem is when we are creating a monolith application, we have all the code right here in one app, in one ID, in one project, in one Git repository, and we can easily click to the method signature and take a look on how this works. And if we are splitting our application into multiple different parts, it will be really harder to find out how does it work, how all the modules connected to each other, and so on. So you'll have to write more documentation, and this documentation will have to be more detailed. Okay, so it's a problem, I think. So we'll need more documentation. Okay, so I just explained to you a few problems I see that module federation will bring to us, and we need to make kind of a conclusion. Yeah? So you might ask, so you don't need module federation, right? I don't think so. I think that module federation is a great tool. It's really a game changer for us, but I would say it's not for all of us, because module federation introduces tons of trade-offs like version, performance, overall complexity of the system, communication, state management, testing, monitoring, documentation, and others. And we'll have to waste lots of time to deal with these trade-offs. Okay, so I would say that for now, it would be better, I think, not to use module federation in our projects and wait a few time, maybe a few months or years, when the community develops the solutions for these problems and for these trade-offs. I mean, great solutions that will allow us to leverage on maybe most of these trade-offs easily. Okay, and wait for the times when module federation will be simple to use and will introduce on few trade-offs for our applications. Okay, that's almost all that I wanted to talk to you. So again, who am I? My name is Nick, and here's my Twitter handle. Don't hesitate to follow me. Find me at How to Make the Software, have a newsletter, so join. Here's a few resources if you want to learn about module federation more deeply. I bet we will share this presentation. You'll be able to find these resources and learn through them. There's really great resources. And frankly speaking, that's it. So I'm waiting for questions.
Thanks a lot, Nikita, for the talk. It's nice and interesting once again. And we do have some questions. And the first question is from the audience, from Kos. How the module federation is different from script type equal to module?
Okay. Script type equals module. As I remember, script type equals module is a HTML standard that allows us to download like modules, JavaScript modules inside the browser. It's a completely different thing because module federation is a Webpack plugin that allows you to build your application in such a way that some parts of the application can be consumed by other applications in the runtime. So I would say they're completely different things. I have no idea how to compare them.
Okay,
So,
okay, cool. One more question from my side.
Okay.
So while I was listening to that, I started to think about some use cases. So is this module federation stuff is more suitable when you want to integrate the whole small application to another one, or you can also use it to distribute just some independent components? Like
That's a good question. I would say as an idea of that module federation, of the idea of it, Webpack plugin is to allow us to compile, to split our applications into multiple different parts and compile and deploy them separately. And I think that will work for all the use cases. Okay, and for integration, the whole small app inside your apps, and for component sharing system, for instance, as I showed an example during the talk, that I think that's a great idea to build your design system or your components library as a module federation plugin and then distribute it everywhere, so everyone across the web will be able to consume it and everyone will be able to get instant updates. So I think it will be suitable for all the types of the applications and use cases. But again, as a topic of my talk, it's introduced lots of trade-offs, and some of use cases will just will not win, never win.
Yeah, so just to make it completely sure. So for example, imagine we're building some design system with buttons and other really small components. So it's expected that when you will integrate it, you will need to pass some input arguments in it, right? So it's also supportable because it's a pure JavaScript.
Yep.
But
so
you will not be able to use the TypeScript typings and features.
I would say no, just because you're using TypeScript at the build time. But module federation will allow you to download some stuff at the runtime. So at the runtime, we have no TypeScript at all.
Yeah.
I think in that case,
right.
you will have to distribute, for instance, types for your library somehow separately, and maybe in that case, you will use it during the development, and then in the right time, you'll have to just download the required module and run it. So something like that.
I see. Cool. Thank you. One more question from Lars regarding to the first one. So is model filtration solving a problem Webpack created in the first place? Philosophical one.
Well, great. In the first place, what problem are we talking about?
Yeah, Lars, maybe you can join us with this question.
Oh, as you can see, oh yeah, Lars, you're here. Could you please elaborate on your question?
Yeah, it's in the next comment, and I think I'm coming from the same place as Kos, who was asking, because it seems that ES modules and content sharing policies and all that would be able to do most of this natively. It's just the bundling that made this difficult in the first place to refer to common modules and so on.
I would say yep, but I didn't use this combination of the ES modules and CSP the right time. So frankly speaking, I have no idea how does it work and how will it behave in the real projects. But I would say that Webpack will be better, I think, just because it's already created, tested, and well-working solutions that's intended to load all the stuff directly in the browser without any need to rewrite and reconfigure your code. You just need to reconfigure the way you bundle your application. Also, regarding your question and ES modules and CSP, what about shared dependencies? How will it behave if we can? Will it resolve all the required dependencies for us, or will we have to do that by ourselves? So I think right now the module federation is the most fulfilling solution for that problem. So it tries to fill all the gaps. I think that will be the answer. Okay, so except that you do have to precompile the TSC into JavaScript components and native standard approach. Okay. And
yeah, it's just a comment. I don't think we need to elaborate on that. So let me push just the last one, okay? And we'll continue. Yeah, the last one, I was also interested about the deployment. So you was talking a lot about that. It's available everywhere and stuff. And but is there any free host like an NPM for the libraries to support that?
I would say no. So it's more like an idea to distribute your design system and component library through the module federation. It's module federation is for more like distributing libraries through the module federation is just one of the things you can do. And I don't think that something like that already exists, but it's a good idea to build something like that.
Yeah, because
good idea for my next project.
That would be something also very well-known. And we have one more question from the audience.
Pardon me, regarding the previous question, I just want to add a bit regarding the previous question. So for instance, you're doing open website that everybody can use it, and you can configure it such way to expose all the UI components from it. So everyone across the web will be able to use components from your website in their websites, and it will work that way. So that's a great thing to share.
I see. So you will need to maintain it anyway, and also expose it. Okay, that's cool. And promise the last one. Is there any problems with the older browsers?
Any problems with the older browsers? Well, frankly speaking, I have no idea. I didn't try to run it into old IE, but I would say that maybe it will have things. Even Angular just dropped the support of IE 10, as I remember. So I don't think it's will work, but it might be. We need to test it, okay? So I have no answer for this question.
Okay, we're done with questions, and thanks a lot, Nikita. It was great and interesting topic. A little bit Hollywood, which is really cool for our meetup. So
yeah, sure. Just write in the comments if you have opposite mind.
Yeah, it would be great if you will post the link to your presentation with all the links for information just to YouTube chat, so that everybody will have it. Okay, and we can say thank you to you once again, and can continue our talking and go to the next speaker. So Lars, before we start, maybe you can tell us just a couple of words about yourself and maybe something about some open source projects you are contributing to.
Okay. Well, I'm Lars Brink. I work as a front-end architect in Denmark. And yeah, I'll be mentioning about open source. I'll be mentioning that during this talk. You said that I usually cover content in like topics in depth. Today it's more about my personal story of getting more and more involved into tech contributions. So it's not about code or anything like that today, but usually it is.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, well, this whole talk is about what I do, so I'll just let the presentation tell you what I'm all about.
Okay, so let's start then. So please share your screen so I can add it to the stream,
Yes,
okay?
I will.
Yeah, so I'm going silent and stage is yours. So welcome, Lars.
Thank you. This is about the 10 steps I took to making tech contributions. And the first place I started was internal knowledge sharing. This is an example we're seeing here where I'm doing a workshop for my colleagues, training them in Angular unit testing. And there's actually a lot of ways you can do internal knowledge sharing. And when I say internal, I mean internal to a company. For example, here there's you can document your shared libraries and tooling. You can document the onboarding process, how to set up your development environment, and which tools you're going to need, and so on. That's actually very helpful when you're first joining a company to have all of this in place. Like there's not much worse than joining a company and you have to spend days to set up the whole thing and no one remembers how to do it. You can also document your system and project architecture. That can also be helpful depending on your churn or how many people are leaving and joining the company and whether you're using consultants or contractors and so on. You can also just share some recipes or maybe instructions for some code generation tools you're using. You could also share a blog post with just inspiration and look at this new thing, or you can mention it in the chat, your company chat or whatever. We can also do more like in-person events. Not right now, but I guess you could do it virtually, and sometimes you do. But it's usually very good to do this in person. Like you can have hackathons. So basically, you get to pick what you want to work on for a day or two or whatever. That can spark some innovation. The main thing there is, but you need to follow up on it afterwards. Like the organizers or the company hosting that hackathon should do some action points on actually taking some of these ideas and seeing if they can progress into something, a new innovation for the company or for a community. Of course, you can also do internal tech talks and workshops, and I've been doing that for many years. You can mentor junior developers or a full stack developer that needs to learn Angular or React or whatever. You can do pair programming, which is usually very helpful. And you can, of course, do code reviews. That's also a way of transferring knowledge and sharing your professional values and conventions and so on. but that's not really contributing to the tech community at large. That's just internal knowledge sharing. So, but that's where I started, and then I started my tech community contributions by doing a talk at a meetup, just like this one. This was, I think it was in 2018 in Denmark. There's a local meetup in Aarhus, the second largest city in Denmark. And I had been attending for a few times, and the organizer was asking me about what I was doing at work, and I was telling him about some new projects we were doing, and he thought it was very interesting. So he asked me if I would like to do a talk about something like that, and I ended up creating this model view presenter with Angular talk that we're seeing here in the picture, and it was a great moment for me because that he motivated me to do that talk, and that's what pushed me beyond just internal knowledge sharing and into external contributions to the whole tech community or parts of it, right? And so the best advice there is just go do it. Like, don't wait around. I mean, I had been thinking about writing articles and for years. I hadn't been thinking much about doing tech talks at meetups, but this is the moment that kind of pushed me off the edge and just take a dive into contributions, and turned out I liked it very much. And the organizer of that meetup is a close friend of mine today, so it's also nice. Like, that's another part of meetups, is you get to grow your network and meet people that are really passionate and into the same things as you, and having heated discussions and so on. So that was a very nice experience for me. I have a few tips about speaking at meetups. First of all, practice. Remove all the unnecessary content, and then remove some more. Speak out the words loud when you're rehearsing. It's one thing to have it in your head or even written as a full script, but just saying it out loud, even to yourself, or even better to a friend or whomever might understand what you're talking about, that's the best practice. It gives you a lot of confidence, and you won't stumble as much with the words when you're going to speak them at the meetup. So that's a very, very good tip. You should also try to engage with your audience. It's a little bit more difficult in virtual meetups because of the delay and people enjoying themselves. I don't know what you're doing at home, but you're not very active in the chat right now. And also, don't feel bad about your performance. It usually feels a lot worse than it actually is. I went home and watched the recording of that talk, and I felt that it was terrible, but turned out it wasn't so bad, and people actually gave me good feedback, and yeah, it's usually feels a lot worse than it actually is. So again, just go do it and find out how to make yourself more calm and confident about your topic. Then I actually started writing tech articles. It was originally based on this first presentation I did at a meetup about the MVP, or model view presenter pattern, for combining that with the Angular framework. That's actually an ongoing series that I'm still adding a chapter to every now and then. So that's been an interesting journey as well. Lately, I've been writing about testing as well, as we can see in this image. So that, because that's one of the things I'm into, is automated testing and automated workflows and CI, software architecture. And Kas is telling me he's here. That's nice. Nice to write something in the comments. Thank you. Yeah, so writing articles, again, I had been thinking about it for years. I've been doing it a lot internally on the company blogs. It's, to me, it was just about doing it again, because Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? You'll be very happy once you have done it. So don't get yourself too worked up about it. Just go and do it, and you will feel great. Move on to the next thing, and don't have regrets about how it could have been even better and so on. I mean, of course, if you see something terribly wrong, go fix it. But other than that, just leave it and move on to the next thing. Yeah, so I was actually contributing quite a lot. I started on a publication back then. It was called Angular in Depth. So it was about Angular, and it was in-depth articles. That later became a company that's now called In-Depth Dev, based in Ukraine. Now it's expanding into other topics than Angular. And I wrote there for a while as well. But let me get back to that later. I have a few tips for writing as well. First of all, write in a natural language voice. Don't try to make it an academic paper. People's attention spans are very short, and they don't write. Then they don't like getting tired of reading your content just to learn about a topic. They will leave and find things that are easier to read. Focus on just one core topic per article, and then remove everything else. Avoid abbreviations when you're writing for a worldwide language. Don't use EG or IE. Write out the words instead. Like instead of EG, you can say, for example. Instead of IE, you can say that is. People will understand that, but even if they know the abbreviations, it'll be harder for them to read your content when they have to do that mapping from English to the local language and so on. So avoid that. Find your niche. To me, it was Angular for a few years. Now I'm getting more into the NX toolchain by Narwhal, monorepo tooling for not only Angular, but React and Node.js and Nest.js and Next.js and Storybook. And yeah, it's a very, how can I say it? Like, it's a very versatile toolchain, and has a lot of nice APIs you can use for creating plugins yourself and adding better support for your framework and your use cases and so on. Get a mentor. To me, it was Max Koretsky from the Angular in Depth and now In-Depth Dev. He helped me with my first articles, and that was a great inspiration to me. So, like, find someone who can help you and support you and review your work. That will do wonders for your writing. My final tip here is don't stop, or rather stop listing code as images in articles. It's fine for Twitter, but don't do it in articles. Like, people can't use it for anything. So it might look nice, but it's a terrible experience for the reader. So think about your reader. No, don't think about your fancy bling code snippets. The three main ingredients I always keep in mind when I'm doing my writing is these three parts. I like to explain the theory and the concepts on an abstract level, but then I also try to write something for different types of learners. Like, some people just learn in code samples, so they just want to see the code and they don't want to read about the concepts in depth. So just show them some code. It has to be simple but realistic code examples. So don't do foo and bar. Use real or realistic use cases instead, or animals, whatever. But more ideally, it should be something related to business, so it's a realistic scenario. But it should be simple as well. So don't get too advanced, because you'll lose track of the core topic of the article. And the third and also an important one, visualize the concepts. Some people are more of visual learners, and even the ones that are not, it'll usually help them remember your content. When they refer to it later, they can review the images, they can review the code samples, and get up to speed again quickly. We have an example here, one of my visualizations of route guards in Angular. So those are the ones that are saying you're not logged in, go to the login page, or you are logged in, or you are an admin, so you're allowed to go to the admin page. So just things like that makes it easier and more enjoyable for the reader, and that's what it's all about. Then I started contributing to open source. As we can see here in my timeline on GitHub from 2018, I made a few contributions to Angular. I did a lot of experiments as well. I created some work in progress libraries and some ready for production libraries, and that's usually a nice exercise, but you really need to find something that you think is interesting or you'll lose interest. But open source, it doesn't have to be contributing to existing projects. It can be example projects, and I've done quite a lot of them myself to demonstrate some concepts or to experiment and trying to push a framework beyond its limits and so on. So I think I have almost 80 repos in my GitHub account, and that's the type of things I've been doing. I've also been making minor contributions to different projects from Microsoft and Angular and NX and so on. And as we see in the heat map of my GitHub profile, it's been growing, my interest in open source, and for this past year, it grew beyond 1,000 contributions on GitHub. So it's nice to see that I'm not losing interest. On the contrary, I started maintaining some open source projects that we'll discuss a bit later. If you want to get into contributing to projects, documentation is always a great place to start. It's always lacking, and it's easier to contribute to than the code base in a lot of cases. Try to focus your efforts on one or a few projects that you feel is interesting and valuable. And if the development environment is too complicated, don't waste your time. Just use the CI workflow. That's what I do with Angular, because it's very complicated to get their development environment up and running, especially if you're on Windows. The same goes for NX. So don't waste your time. Find another project or work with the CI server, but that gets pretty boring pretty quickly. Then I was actually lucky enough to start get some light here, to start speaking at conferences. This is from NG Poland in 2019. Great conference. It was also JS Poland the very next day. And the nice thing about conferences is you get to meet a lot of, or even more, nice people than at your local meetup. And that's actually where I met a lot of these people that are here today, like Valentin and Nikita, Serkan as well, and many other nice people. For example, I think I have another one here. This is Alex Okrushko. I've met him at a few conferences, and he's a very nice person. He recently switched from working at Firebase to now he's at Cisco. And I've really enjoyed getting to learn, getting to know Alex. He's a big open source contributor himself, and also does writing and speaking at conferences and so on. I even get to bring my family. So sometimes this is my wife and my twin daughters, and next to them is sitting Michael from Norway, that I also met to a couple of conferences and speak to at a regular basis. So conferences and meetups, it's all about meeting people, making friendships, and growing your network. Of course, it can be quite a challenge to, like, it takes a lot of preparation, first of all, and you need to get accepted to even get there. But if you manage to do it, you'll be very happy that you did. Once you start speaking at conferences, you should really time your rehearsals, because there's usually a very short time span between your talk and the next speaker. So that can be a bit of a challenge. So for example, if there's a 25 or 30-minute time slot, don't speak for 25 or 30 minutes, because they need time to switch speakers and get people out of the room and next people into the room and so on. So be very careful with your timing. I usually I try to take a pessimistic look at what could go wrong. So I export my slideshow as a PDF and bring it on a USB stick, just in case my laptop doesn't work or gets stolen, whatever. I can borrow a computer from someone else, and that has actually saved me a few times. Go visit the speakers room and other speakers events like the speaker dinner. If there's something like that, that's a very, very good time. Do I have anything else to say about conferences? Well, 2019 was the year I started speaking at conferences. I went to the NG Vikings conference, the Angular conference, and it was in Denmark, in Copenhagen. I went to the Angular in Depth conference in Kiev, Ukraine, and I went to Warsaw in Poland for the NG Poland and JS Poland conferences. That was great. I was hoping to do a lot of conferences in 2020, but COVID put an end to that, and I really lost my interest in conferences after that. But who knows? Maybe next year. So I actually went on and started mentoring writers and editing or reviewing their articles. There were a lot of new writers joining the in-depth website or community of writers. So again, I got to know a lot of people, and I really enjoyed helping people improve their writing skills and giving them my tips for writing. And I have a few more, I think, in a few slides. Here's some of them. Don't include any fluff. Add value, not volume, to your content. Get straight to the point. People have a short attention span, and there's a ton of articles out there for the same topics usually. So don't write a long introduction. Just explain what they're going to learn and get right on into the content. If you write longer articles, and I sometimes do, make sure they're easy to scan, but also consider splitting them into individual articles to make them easier to finish reading and reference them later on, because it can be a hard time to scroll through a very long article. Include your own perspective and add your own experience to bring that unique value to your articles. I mean, there can be 10 articles about Angular React components, but your experience is the unique part. So make sure you add that. Finish strong. So make sure you write up a nice summary in your conclusion. Recap what the reader has just learned. Maybe add your suggestions on what would be the next step from here. Maybe references to other material. And just finish on a good note. Don't skip the conclusion, because that's, just finish strong. It's very important. The introduction and the conclusion should be as good as the main content. I was also lucky enough to receive the Microsoft MVP Award in developer technologies. And when was that? 2020, I think. So let me share a bit about that process in case you want to do something like that yourself. First, the first thing you need to do is make community contributions like the ones we're discussing today. contributions is not only open source. It can be open source, but it can also be articles and talks and meetups and books and managing communities and forums and a lot of different things. So once you have done that, and that's not the easy part, of course, you need to get nominated by a Microsoft employee or a Microsoft MVP. And yeah, I just figured at some point it could be interesting to see if I could become a Microsoft MVP. So I asked a friend of mine, and then I went to the first step, which was then I was asked to submit my contributions in a web form. And then the program committee, they compared my contributions to the contributions of other people in my region of the world and in my category, the developer technologies. And I guess they figured I made some good contributions, so I received this MVP award and a certificate or whatever, signed by Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. And then every year you have to go do it all again. I mean, you don't have to get nominated again if you're already an MVP, but on the 1st of July, all your contributions are reset as far as Microsoft is concerned. So you have to continue making contributions to the community to stay an MVP. So you can go back to step 1, but you can skip step 2. But that's it. It repeats itself in a loop. I also started authoring a book, and this one is about Angular. I won't bore you with the details on that, but I will share a few tips from my point of view. First of all, it takes a lot of time. You can join with a publisher so that they can take care of reviews, the design, the distribution, the marketing, and even more. But in return, you have to provide them with a very detailed outline and an estimated schedule so that they can make their bosses happy. Don't write a book to get rich. You probably won't become rich by writing a book. And again, it takes a lot of time. So that's my experience. Recently, I went into more permanently maintaining open source software projects. We are building a small team of different people maintaining a few repos on GitHub. They are listed here. I don't know if you can read it, but it says NX worker and NG worker. NG is for Angular. NX is the NX toolchain. So we're doing a lot of different projects there. We're doing an Angular testing library right now. We're doing NX plugins for NX workspaces and Angular. We're doing Lumberjack is a logging library for Angular. We're just finished the release candidate for version 2, so that's exciting as well. And a few connected projects to that. So the team is Nacho Vasquez, who's in the chat. It's Serkan also joined, and Santosh Yadav also joined the team. So this is the nice part about open source. Find a team that you like, and you'll have a great time. And also find a project you like, or start your own. Write some documentation. It's boring, but it's very important to get people to be interested in your projects. I mean, you can have the best code in the world, but if no one understands how to use it or why it's there, what's the point? Encourage and support contributions and feedback from the community. That's very important. Don't build a gap between you and your community. Don't leave PRs and issues hanging. Because there is a difference between open source software and openness in software. And there's a good publication here by the Linux Foundation about determining the true openness of open source projects. Openness is not about having access to the source code. I mean, that's maybe the literal description of open source software, but there's even more ways to be open, like open governance and open projects and processes, and open communication. So yeah, this is a very, very nice resource. I strongly recommend you read this one. So just go to the Linux Foundation and search for openness, and you'll find it, or use this link. My final step in tech contribution so far is I left the in-depth dev group, and I created 2 publications of my own on the dev community, dev.to. And this one is called This is Learning, and it's about free, open, and honest software education. It's free from conflict of interest, so there's no affiliation with any company. It's all about sharing knowledge, and it's not about numbers or making money. And I invite every one of you to join if you like to start writing, or already you already are writing. There's a second one specifically focused on Angular. It's called This is Angular, but you can find them both on the dev community. So that's what I had for you today. So thank you very much for listening. And then Valentin is back.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Lars. I don't know, I cannot say for everybody, but I was really listening like this. So it's really inspiring. And while I was listening, I formulated 3 goals for myself for this year regarding the writing some articles, some open source projects and stuff. So it's I just wanted to say thank you once again. But I have some questions. And first of all, so when I was writing some articles or trying to do something apart from my regular basis job, it always was kind of related, because you're doing something in your company, you come up with some new library or some stuff, and you can share this knowledge if it's okay with the company. So what's your opinion on that? So is it possible that you work on a company on some technical stuff, but you write and you do open source on absolutely something absolutely different? So
for sure, it hasn't been the case for many years that many companies allowed you to spend time on open source, but in the past few years, we've seen a kind of new movement in this area, that more companies have developer relations or developer advocates, and more companies are offering that you can spend your working hours, or some of them, doing open source, because we're also depending on open source projects. So maybe it could benefit the company if you're writing a pull request for the project you're using, or maybe you can release your own software that others can use, and your company can benefit from that as well. I am now lucky enough that I have an employer that allows me to spend 10% of my time doing whatever, basically, it's or spending on knowledge sharing. So sometimes I spend some of my working hours writing articles. Sometimes I prepare a talk like this one, and other times I contribute to open source, and that's a really nice balance. Keeps me sharpening my skills. It keeps me aware of what's going on, and I can share the Systemate name with the community as well, and you can learn that it's a good place to work, and they have nice people working there.
Cool. Thank you. That's something I was always thinking about. And the next question is the one I was also wanted to ask. So how to combine the life and an open source and all such contributions, especially if you have some kids. You have 2 twins, I have 2 daughters. The guys can also have 3 children. So what's your vision on that? Apart from 10% of time on the work.
I don't sleep very much. Probably 5.5 hours per day on average.
So when do you prefer do your technical stuff? So later in the evening, or you try to get up earlier? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm usually doing tech contributions at night. So the daytime I spend with my kids and my wife, and when they go to bed, I go back to the computer and write some code or some articles. So yeah, the short answer is I don't sleep much, but the longer answer is it's just it's an interest. Like, it's my personal hobby. It's how I relax. It's relaxing to me, even though it's similar to work, right? But I get to choose what I spend my time on and how much. So sometimes it can even help like get rid of frustrations with the project you're currently working in, like someone else is deciding something that you disagree on, or you're not working with the technologies you love, or whatever. You can do that in open source. Maybe you're frustrated that you have to deliver features as if you're a feature factory instead of focusing on code quality. So in open source, there's time for greatness. There's time for high quality software. It's actually expected, right? So there's no room for shipping fast because of time constraints or whatever. No, you should focus on quality, and that can be a really enjoyable experience compared to some working situations.
I see. That's pretty nice. Another thing, looking to your tips and listening to that, one of them was really touched some strings in my soul. It's about the academic voice of language. And personally, I have previously experienced being a tutor in a university and publishing some articles with my science tutor and stuff. And it changed me a lot, making all that academic soundness for the articles and stuff. So how you come up with that?
It's just based on it's just based on experience. I started out doing academic style writing, but yeah, I guess it was Max who told me first. Max Koretsky who told me first. Don't be so technical, or try to speak in a more natural voice or something like that. And it just stuck with me. And I guess I'm reading other people's stuff, and what I dislike about other people's contents, I'll try to change that in my own, and it's kind of evolved over time. And online content is more about short and easy to read and enjoyable to read. So it's different from a book. Like, a book can be academic and very abstract, and as I pointed out, in you should also have, or at least I try to also have, like, abstract and theoretical level, but then you make it more relatable by turning it into code and drawings and illustrations as well. So yeah, it's just my personal experience and advice was given to me, and I've been thinking a lot about it ever since. I also have an academic background, so I didn't know how else to begin, right? And you want to make sure everything's perfect, and you want to cover every single detail, but you're actually not doing yourself any favors by doing that. You should be more relatable to your audience, and you should speak directly to the audience as if you're sitting next to each other. So use terms like you and we instead of they and one should and they do and stuff like that. Yeah, it's about being relatable and engaging with your reader, even though you wrote it once and they read it at a later point in time, but should be able to relate to each other in the best way possible.
Okay, is it okay from your perspective to put words like "do like this," "don't do like that" in the articles, like imperatives?
Yeah, you should be careful with the words you're using. I try to remember not to use words like easy or just or simply and things like that, because again, it builds a gap between you and your reader. Maybe it's easy for you or for me, right? Because I spent months researching this, but it might not be easy to the reader, and the reader might feel very stupid if you're saying it's simple and they don't understand it right away. So avoid using words like easy and simply and basic and of course and stuff like words like that. And what were the other ones you were asking about?
Anything in imperative way, like you should do like that, or you should not in any case do like this. Like, this is a crap.
Well, you can choose to intentionally make an opinionated article, and I've done a few of those. But you shouldn't alienate people either by saying you're doing it wrong. I've done that as well. Don't do it intentionally. Don't try to demeanor your audience or telling them that they're poor developers indirectly or directly. That's not the point, right?
Okay.
So be nice to your reader.
Yeah, exactly. I think I can keep endlessly with such kind of questions. It's always a really interesting topic for me. So the very first article I wrote, I was hesitated, I don't know, several days just before I published it, and it was polishing. And there is a nice comment from Kos also. So do not hesitate to post the first article. It will never be 100% polished. Yeah. But maybe a couple of more questions. What's your favorite duration for the article? So the time the reader should read it.
It should usually be around 5 to 8 minutes of reading time, whatever that means. That's usually the sweet spot for online articles. I tend to write longer than that. But that's, first of all, because I usually cover some pretty advanced or novel topics. But secondly, because I also try to include those 3 main ingredients. So it fills out more text and content when you're also trying to live up to these 3 ideals of good content. But yeah, I'm trying to make shorter articles. It's also usually more enjoyable because you can finish faster and move on to the next thing. Like a comment in the chat, don't spend too much time perfecting it and making sure everything's 100% correct. I mean, you'll get feedback, and like I said, you'll be very happy when you move on to the next thing. You won't worry about the previous one. You'll just enjoy good feedback from people and having finished something, and in a lot of cases you'll be referring to it later on yourself when you forgot how to do it, and you'll be happy you wrote about it.
Yeah, that's a good advice actually. And what about the book? Is your book published already?
It's not published yet. I'm working with another Danish co-author. I don't even know what it's going to be called. I don't care too much. The publisher will decide that. But it's about Angular Ivy. So that's version 9 of Angular. And today we're at version 11. It's about the stable features of Ivy. It's a functional guide to the most interesting features of, in my opinion, of the newest versions of Angular. So first, there's a bit of theory and simple examples about how you can use these new features of Angular and TypeScript. And then there's like a real-world application where you write new features for this existing app using some of the new Angular and TypeScript technology. And then the final third part is about migration, migrating from the old Vue engine to the Ivy renderer in Angular, and about how Ivy improves the developer experience in various ways. So yeah, it's not done yet. It'll be a few more months, and then it'll be available on I think on Amazon and on Pact Publishing. So it'll be affordable for sure. I like to share content for free. So I joined with this publisher so I could not publish it for free, but at least it'll be affordable, hopefully to very many people. And that's like, I'm not trying to make money, just trying to share it with a lot of people at an affordable price, and the publisher will earn most of the money. But it's just for sharing knowledge and trying to have another experience and see how I like that.
Okay. Once again, thanks so much, Lars. It was just incredibly cool and nice talking to you and listening to all that inspirable stuff. So I enjoyed it a lot. So thanks. And I guess we are closing up. So if you want to say anything, so feel free, and I will end the broadcast.
I don't have anything more to say except thanks for having me, and thanks for being here, all of you in the audience. You can send me private messages on Twitter. Just search for my name. It's very long, so there shouldn't be anyone else with that name. And thank you for having me, Valentin, and thank you, Nikita, for you're the first one speaking up against Module Federation, except for me. Every time I do it, Zach, the creator of Module Federation, gets mad at me. So nice to have another person supporting me.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you, Lars. Thanks to everybody who stayed with us till this very same moment, and have a good rest of your evening. Take care, guys. See you.
Bye.